Everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. It is Friday afternoon as you get into your weekend, as you get into, I guess, week 4 for the football Hogs. Man, the football season is blowing by. 2-1, 0-1 SEC, but you're back to non-conference. Still on the road, though, at Memphis tomorrow. So we know for a lot of folks, they get their attention on football season right now, but boy, it is heavy in recruiting, especially for Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball, especially this time of year and especially this week. We know that. We talk about it every day that we've come on. We're here to do some of that again today and bring you maybe a more brief, succinct update than we've had in a while, just because we want to let some of these visits play out. We just had one conclude. I've got a little bit more intel for you on that one. We talked about that visit yesterday when we came on. Yesterday was the conclusion of the visit, and so we gave you some information on Tay Kenny, 5-star guard out of the state of Kentucky. That's been a priority recruit for Calipari and his staff going back to their Kentucky days. Arkansas. I've got a little bit more info for you for last weekend's official visitor, Abdou Toure, and a conversation that I was made privy to, which shed some light on some of the things we've been talking about. I found it interesting. I just found this out yesterday. Saw Jordan Smith arrival. Yes, I put a tweet out just a little while ago that Jordan's there too. He got there this afternoon. Irfan Diane, I put a tweet out yesterday. The 7-1 center out of Iowa United Prep, Jordan Smith Jr., top 5 rated 5-star guard out of Fairfax, Virginia. But the tweet yesterday was Irfan told me he was leaving in the morning. He was to arrive in Fayetteville. And he arrived in the AM. He actually got here this morning. I was texting back and forth with his guardian. I put a tweet out just a few minutes ago that they were literally at that time, touring the student athlete facilities. And we're getting ready to attend basketball practice. And a basketball practice that was scheduled to start around 2:30. They might delay that a little bit only because Jordan Smith Jr. did arrive this afternoon. It wasn't too long ago. They were getting to the Performance Center. John Calipari, Chin Coleman, Jordan Smith Jr. Been talking back and forth with his dad, Jordan Smith Sr. As you know, the last several episodes, the intel we brought have been coming directly from these players' camps, not from some other media person out there doing the work, and then we come on and try to sound smart like we're plugged in. We don't do that. We're actually in talking to the folks embedded in these camps. Matter of fact, I had an hour-plus long conversation with Jalen Williams, his dad, Pro Hog J. Will. You know the guy, you know the stud, you know the big part of Arkansas's back-to-back Elite Eight runs back in the day. Well, J. Will's been in Fayetteville for most of the week, at least 3 or 4 days. He's got to get back to Oklahoma City pretty soon. In fact, some of the Thunder players are getting back this week. Some other ones coming maybe in the week, later in the weekend or early next week. But Jay Will's been in Fayetteville, and it's not unusual for pro Hogs, former Hogs, to be in town, to get into the basketball performance center. Sometimes they run with the team. Depends. A lot of times they don't, but they are getting treatment or doing some other things in there. And Jay Will's been one of the players that's been up there, and he's still there today. He's still there today, and his dad's keeping me apprised of what's going on with that. As you know, I did an interview with 5-star future Hog J.J. Andrews a couple of days ago. That's been out on my YouTube live channel. Toure's, golly, my eyes are so blurry I couldn't even read that. The comment stayed up there long enough for me to read it, and without my readers on right now, it was so blurry I couldn't. I saw Toure. My apologies. But Deshaun J.J. Andrews, if you haven't seen that interview, it's been out a couple of days on our HogvilleNET YouTube channel. But he told me he'd be in Fayetteville. Well, tonight he's got a camp. Today, a youth camp here in Little Rock. And then tomorrow he's in Fayetteville. And I put him on the spot. Are you going to drop by? You know, the practice, the performance center for practice, or, you know, just get on campus. You know, those visitors up there and you know them. You know, played on the same circuit as Jordan Smith Jr., played in all-star events with both he and Irfan Diane. And there's a chemistry there with he and Diane that's been talked about a lot. And so there's a lot going on. You got pro Hogs, a future Hog, who's trying to bolster this class if he can. You know, JJ's, you know, go see the interview. It's cool how he handled the question when I asked him about recruiting. Go check that out for yourself. Less than 10 minutes, so it's not a long watch. He really did a really good job with it. But look, both players are already on campus. Tay Kenny just got off campus yesterday. We mentioned that. And we brought you some intel about, once again, he was Arkansas's 4th official visitor spanning back several weeks. Caleb Holt, then Brandon McCoy Jr., then Abdou Toure. And I gave you updates yesterday on where I think things stand with those guys. And Tay Kenny, we always said this is going to be, it looks like a Kansas thing, but Calipari sees it a little bit differently, at least for now, because he continued to go out to see him and his folks. and then brought him in for this midweek visit and sooner than what was planned later in the month, because later in the month he makes his commitment announcement on the same day that was to be that September 28th, his final day of his OV that was scheduled at that time for Arkansas. So we've gone through all that, and we came on and said, in addition to the first three visitors, the Kenny visit, I was told, the vision that Calipari and staff had for him and how they were going to help him elevate his game and get ready for the next level was outstanding. It was just, second to none kind of thing. So that he was having a lot of fun on the visit. You could see that with the content he was putting out, but he does that a lot of social media content, more than most. That's part of his branding and all that. We talked all about that yesterday. So that's the information I gave you yesterday. Someone close to this situation, here's the intel, did not say anything negative whatsoever, but it was not as enthusiastic as it was about other visits. And I think there's some cautious optimism, because I think there is some ground to overcome. And it's not just because Kansas is another blue blood program and it's Bill Self, another great coach. It's about the NIL. I think there's some NIL opportunities because of the Adidas connections. We've talked about this a lot, some other stuff. And it's how far does Calipari want to go there? I think at the end of the day, if Arkansas wants to step up in those money-making opportunities and promotions, whatever it is that what has sweetened the deal for him to really get into the camp with Kansas, if Arkansas goes there, I think Arkansas wins this recruitment. Because I think Calipari, the relationship is there, and his track record is better than Bill Self's when you look at the history of the guys going to the next level. So, but I'm hearing the NIL numbers, and you never know what's real. But the point is that I'm not sure where Arkansas values this situation and how far the Hogs are willing to go. But I do think it's interesting when we saw visits canceled with Texas and Miami here at the last minute, but not Arkansas. But then it was moved up to give some breathing room after the visit, a midweek visit. You already had two coming in. You could almost argue, was it rushed? Is it one of those things? And we went through it yesterday. Either Calipari feels confident that he's got a real shot here to make up that ground and end up winning in the end, or he's placating on some level, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't see that being something you'd waste your time with and make those trips out like he did even earlier this week, trying to shore up a visit. So keep an eye on it. And I think at the end of the day, does Arkansas step up NIL-wise to make the Kenny thing happen? Because I think if they decide to do that, I think Arkansas is going to win that player. Torrey, I got an interesting got feedback, was privy to a conversation from someone who I know. So I got details about this conversation. The person had it directly with Abdu Torrey when he was on his Arkansas visit. And what we've talked about a lot is nixing this idea that UConn is not in the mix. Maybe they're prioritizing Coke maybe with more NIL. But this idea that UConn's out of the mix here, not seriously in it, I have said all along, the Arkansas coaching staff doesn't believe that. I have enough sources where I don't believe that. And now I have more information that weighs into that. Based on this conversation that came back to me, and I wasn't fishing anything about UConn or anything like that. I had no idea what the conversation was, only what was shared with me. And it went right there that this person who had that conversation felt like, based on the words coming from Abdu Torrey's mouth, that UConn is not only fully in play, but maybe is, in that situation where I've said it's Arkansas is either leader or co-leader. I don't think those were the words that were used, but it was more in line with the focus was mostly on Arkansas and UConn in that conversation. And Providence is thought as the other school that's right there, or maybe if you hear some people talk about it, it's really down to Arkansas and Providence. No. And so now I have more evidence of that based on a conversation that was shared with me. Not everything word for word verbatim, but the gist of it and the overarching theme above anything else about how great the Arkansas visit was, or what did they do, or what did he like about it. Above all of that was how much work does Arkansas have trying to get a kid out of that area when they have such success UConn does on the players that it targets from that state, how difficult it is. Now, we've said Calipari's track record, getting guys like Darius Acup Jr., Malik Thomas. They're not Connecticut kids, but they're back east, or Midwest, and maybe closer to Connecticut or that brand of basketball up there. And yet Calipari just recruits everywhere, and it doesn't matter. And he won those battles against Dan Hurley specifically in a UConn program that, quite frankly, was looking like it was going to be another dynasty situation with back-to-back national championships. And Calipari wins those recruiting battles for those guys last recruiting cycle. And I've said all along, if this is a guy that Calipari's all in on, Arkansas gets him. But based on this conversation, it became clear that from whatever Torrey was conveying is that UConn is a serious player for him and that this is something that's weighing heavily for him. So that's the information. That's the intel on both guys post-visit. We gave some post-visit stuff on Kenny yesterday, but again, today, the word was kind of, maybe there's more, it's more of an cautious optimism as opposed to some of the, multitude of kind of raving about things or glowing, representations of what went down in some of these other OVs. Less of that, and I think it's more about cautious optimism than anything negative. It didn't come off as something that was, something going south or it just isn't a good thing. It wasn't like that, but it was not like the others either. So it's a vague, right? But it's the best I can do right now to kind of give you some real-time feedback on kind of what was breaking and shaking and some of the information I've just recently come down to me. Remember, the Kitty visit just wrapped up yesterday, Thursday. Torres was this past weekend we just had, so we're not even a full week outside of him leaving campus on Sunday. We're not even a full week there, just 5 days later. So we're going to continue to learn stuff as things move along. Now, let's jump ahead here, or jump to where we are now and, back to today. Is both five-star visitors, again, on campus now. We just went a little bit through it. Deanna getting in a little bit early, touring facilities, getting ready to go to practice. Jordan Smith Jr. will be in the building for practice. We mentioned Jalen Williams, the pro hog who's in town, and the fact that, his dad, I was sharing information with his dad about the visitors that were in there, and he was doing his own research and going to follow up with Jay Will to see what he could find out. It's really cool stuff, and we'll see what we get out of that. But so what's interesting here is you got big man to big man. What have we said about Irfan Diane? He's a skilled big man. Well, what was Jalen Williams? He was a guy that could beat you facing the basket out high on the court, not because it's just his ability to play through dribble handoffs as a big man that sets solid picks and frees up other guards or makes a respectable, competent pass. This guy passes better than most guards, and he could shoot a little bit from three. He became a double-double machine at Arkansas. Not the same kind of player as Deani, but Deani has some face-up skill. And so there's things that's an interesting conversation if it's ever had, assuming that Jay Will remains up there at least today, or who knows how much longer, if any more through the weekend, and if he's in that performance center at the same time. He's been in there, I'm told, most of the week doing stuff, for his prep before he goes back to OKC. So there's some more intel for you. If you already knew that Jay Will was in town, now you know maybe a little bit more. It's good stuff. And again, JJ Andrews, that dynamic also. I wonder whether how much of that and where that goes when he arrives tomorrow on Saturday. So we're definitely keeping an eye on what's going on with these visits. And again, I'm in touch directly with both camps, players as well, and so we'll do as much as we can. I'm still not certain with my Razorback football coverage. I'm not going to Memphis tomorrow for that Razorback football game. But I will have content that I'm putting out, but I may just get up to Fayetteville here, leave the 501 and get up there because there's a lot going on. And we'll see if I'm able to work some other things out on my schedule with family and other things like that to do that, because boots on the ground. The other thing we want to talk about real quick, we're going to do an abbreviated segment this afternoon and try to get out here around 20 minutes. Arkansas announced today, announcement came down today that the Primetime at the Palace, they used to have what was called Midnight Madness events, where they literally, the first day, I think midnight that you could have practice, and I think that was always in October. Now the first full practice start September 22nd. Everything moves up because now your regular season starts in the first few days of November. Back then it was mid or late November. So they've moved the calendar up to squeeze in, I guess, more opportunities. So now you could do an event sooner than they could back then, but then they would do it the stroke of midnight and do a Midnight Madness on that first day of practice. Sometimes they maybe moved it to a different day to accommodate a weekend date or something, a Friday or a Saturday. But the point was, back in the heyday, Nolan Richardson, it was exciting. And back then when they did dunk contests, it was the players on the team. Later on, they, I guess, fear of risk of injury or things like that, you have dunk contests, but it's some local folks or some other things. You just never know. But that's part of what they're going to do with Primetime at the Palace. Now, it won't be at midnight. This has been designated for an 8 p.m. Central Time start on Friday, October 3rd. So 2 weeks from today. And it's free tickets to fans at Bud Walton Arena. So you can go online and get your, I guess you have to go online to order the tickets, but they're free of charge. And it's basically, kind of what you think something like this might be. They're going to have a red-white scrimmage. I don't know how long that's going to last or how much of that you'll see. There'll be a dunk contest again. Will that include players on the current team? Or are they going to do something else like they have done in the past? There's going to be a laser light show as part of this. They're giving away T-shirts to the first 5,000 students or fans, or I don't know, first 5,000 something that show up. They're going to introduce both rosters, men's and women's teams. So Kelsey Music, her first year at Arkansas, of course, Calipari year 2. You're going to have some stuff going on there. So it's, a glorified fan event. When Eric Patrick Melsman was here, they did those red-white games. They didn't even call them that, though, but they were intra-squad scrimmages. And they had theme nights like Throwback 80s and things like that. They were kind of cool. And they did them at Old Barnhill Arena, which I thought was really cool. So you've got your back and Bud, which is where I think we're Calipari running the show. That's where he should be. Now, if he wants to do something at Barnhill, that's great too. I'm all for it. But remember, last year they did 2 tip-off tour events where they didn't have enough players and they had too many players injured to really scrimmage. They just did like a practice. And they did them off campus. They did on the same weekend, a Saturday, Sunday deal, Hot Springs, then Pine Bluff. And they're going back to Hot Springs 9 days later on October 12th. That's a Sunday. They'll be back at Banco ZK Arena, and they plan to do another scrimmage like they plan to do for this whatever they're doing for this prime time at the Palace on October 3rd. So effectively, let's call it a couple of red-white games. To me, you play quarters and you time everything and you got officials. And so let's see what that looks like. Is it just coaches blowing whistles and, letting you watch some 5-on-5 and then their instruction? I mean, I don't know. They use the word scrimmage. And so to me, if it's an intra-squad scrimmage, I prefer officials. I prefer, running a clock and playing quarters or halves, whatever. But they're going to do what they want to do. And so we don't know what that looks like. Again, last year, those 2 events really wasn't scrimmaging. It was practice because they didn't have the bodies to do it. And remember injuries. There were several players that sat out anyway for that and didn't partake. So this seems to me to be something different and a more competitive situation for fans to get their eyes on some of these players in a competitive setting. So I think that's good. But again, prime time at the Palace is what they're calling it. It's an 8 p.m. Central Time start in Fayetteville at Bud Walton Arena. Sounds pretty cool to me. Some of the other stuff, fans bring their kids and those kinds of things will be fun. Laser light show, I don't know. I guess that would be cool too at Bud Walton Arena. We'll see. I plan to be there, so we'll have a better grasp on what this really is. It's better than nothing, right? And you're seeing more and more stuff come out lately. Not a whole lot, but a few little clips here and there. The players doing stuff. They had what they called a media day. I think it was yesterday. It was not a media day at all. Media was not invited up. It's Hogs Plus, which is basically the social media arm, the media arm of the university to put out, their own internal stuff, whether it's player highlights, interviews. And so they were the media. No other actual media that covers the program was invited up for that. So, but you probably saw some photos. There was a photo shoot, again, some video stuff. Some of it looked pretty cool. Some of the interviews, I haven't seen all that content. You're seeing more and more of the players put a little video clip playing highlight clips here and there on their Instagram accounts. Overtime Elite, where Tay Kenny plays, came to town, I guess, for his visit because they tweeted out a lot of content, including former player Malik Thomas hitting a half-court shot, just goofing off. Looked like they were in Bud Walton Arena, maybe. I don't think they were in the performance center. I'm not sure now. I got to go back and look at that. But he hits basically a half-court shot or near that. Just, one of those things. But Overtime Elite had a lot of content they put out with Kenny on his visit, and including that. I thought, that's actually more than we've seen from the university in a while. But we're getting stuff, and so that's always cool. People are constantly asking me about some of Arkansas's other recruits we're not talking about as much. Mika Miernan, the 6'10 flash forward center we've talked so much about. He visited Arkansas a year ago. It was late September, around this time when he was on campus. Visited Michigan and Utah at the time. Utah didn't, Arkansas visit, I was told directly from a source who spoke with him that the Arkansas visit was better than both of those visits. We'll see. He didn't play spring and summer here, but a top 10 rated 5-star in the 2026 class, apparently sticking, obviously, 2026. Had a really good showings playing with grown men, NBA players, a lot of them, in the recent Euro Cup overseas. Arkansas was going to go send a coach out. Then they were undecided originally. Then they decided to send Chin Coleman. Then they decided not to. Instead, use Chin to go on the road in continental U.S. 48 recruiting when that recruiting period opened up on September 3rd. Nonetheless, the staff keeps telling me, but we're still prioritizing him. He's still in our plans to recruit to win it. They're not. It's not a casual. We'll kind of stick around and see, because Arkansas did make his Final 7 list. Now they're actively pursuing that recruitment. And so folks constantly ask me about that. Obviously, Arkansas is still in it because Arafan Diane's on campus, but he's not the only frontline guy Arkansas is looking at and pursuing. Chase Foster, we've talked about a lot. They've actually finalized a visit date. It's just not gone public. And that's one of those things. Do they hold it? Or they have other priorities and they want to see how things play out before that ever comes to light? Or it just goes away. The 6'8 forward out of Baltimore, Maryland, that plays at IMG Academy. You've got also the Ratliff twins now who are on the radar. Baba Aladat, who we've talked a lot about, the reclass from 27 to 26, has a tentative visit date later in October, almost 5 weeks out or so. And then we'll see, does that change? His dad told me he wants to circle back in early October to confirm, yeah, we're definitely coming then. Maybe it's still on, and that sticks as the date. And the Ratliff twins, Calipari hasn't been out to see yet, the 7-footers, but 3 different members on the coaching staff, mostly Chuck Martin, 3 visits out there since April 30th. Most recently, Kenny Payne, associate head coach, Brad Calipari, John Son, who's on the staff as an assistant and also director of player development. So you've had multiple staffers out in the last 3 weeks, and Calipari was planning to go this week, but the Kenny situation moved up, the visit date moved up. You had these official visits through the weekend. So let's see if Calipari goes out next week sometime. And don't forget, the other thing I need to mention about Primetime at the Palace is, and I almost forgot, that's on October 3rd, or Friday night. That's the same weekend that Cole Clower, the 6'7 wing out of North Carolina, that's when his scheduled Arkansas visit is. Now, he just wrapped up his own midweek visit to Alabama after canceling. Who did he cancel midweek? Kentucky. He canceled Kentucky and slotted Alabama in instead. The sharpshooting big wing, small forward, another player that, again, is on the schedule to come in soon, a couple of weeks. And so he would be effectively, I would think, attending that event, coming in, arriving sometime on Friday and able to attend the Primetime at the Palace. And you have an official visitor there, and then we see where that goes. Not as much info on where things are really, where he really, it seems like both UConn and NC State are the two you hear the most about. But there may be opportunities even for Arkansas here, especially knowing Calipari's got to get him on campus. All right, that wraps things up. Over 23 minutes. I want to keep it under 20, and I just couldn't do it. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I appreciate everyone. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't done it already. That helps us out. We appreciate it very much. Turn those notifications on. And if, something breaks with a commitment during the visit here in a few minutes or at sometime today, I'll come back on today. If not, probably sometime tomorrow. We may wait until Sunday to get some more details on the video. It just depends on when we get things and how much it's pressing and we need to come back on. But until next time, always thank you for being here. We appreciate every one of you. And, get your football hogs to 3-1. Do what you can to make that happen. Until next time, we'll see you soon.